The afternoon sun was streaming through the tall windows of the Riverside Music Academy when everything changed for young Jiwon. She was just 10 years old with pigtails that bounced when she walked and a smile that could light up any room. Music was her whole world. Every day after regular school, she would rush to the academy eager to spend time with the instruments she loved so much. That Tuesday started like any other day. Jiwon had finished her regular classes and practically ran the 3 blocks to the music school. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders as she hurried through the iron gates. She was excited because her teacher had promised to teach her a new piece that day, something by Chopin that she had been begging to learn for weeks. The music academy was housed in an old building that had been there for nearly 50 years. It had character, people said. The wooden floors creaked when you walked, and the walls were lined with photographs of students from decades past. Some had gone on to become famous musicians. Others just had happy memories of their time learning here. Jiwon dreamed of having her photo up there someday. She walked through the familiar hallways, greeting the receptionist with her usual cheerful wave. The smell of old wood and sheet music filled the air. She could hear a violin playing somewhere upstairs and a trumpet warming up in another room. These sounds felt like home to her. Her lesson wasn't for another 30 minutes, so Jiwon did what she always did. She headed to the recital hall to practice. The recital hall was special. It was the biggest room in the academy, with a stage at one end and rows of red velvet seats. But what made it truly special was the grand piano that sat center stage. It was a beautiful instrument, black and shiny, and when you played it, the sound filled the entire room like magic. Jiwon wasn't technically supposed to use the grand piano without permission. It was reserved for advanced students and special performances. But her teacher, Miss Yoon, had been letting her practice on it for the past month. "You have a gift," Miss Yoon had told her. "You should play on an instrument worthy of that gift." So Jiwon climbed onto the stage, her small footsteps echoing in the empty hall. She adjusted the bench, opened her music book, and began to play. She started with scales to warm up, then moved on to the pieces she had been working on. Time seemed to disappear when she played. It always did. The notes flowed from her fingers, and she forgot about everything else. The difficult math test she had taken that morning. The argument she had with her older brother at breakfast. When she played, nothing else mattered. She must have been playing for about 20 minutes when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy footsteps, not like Miss Yoon's light steps. Jiwon's hands froze above the keys. She turned around to see Mrs. Han, the school director, standing at the entrance of the hall. Mrs. Han was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She always wore dark suits and hardly ever smiled. Most students were a little afraid of her. "What are you doing here?" Mrs. Han's voice echoed across the empty hall. Jiwon's heart started racing. "I was just practicing before my lesson, Mrs. Han. Miss Yoon said I could." "Did she give you written permission?" Mrs. Han walked down the aisle toward the stage, her heels clicking against the floor. "Well, no, but she said, 'Rules are rules, child. This piano is not for unsupervised practice. Please leave immediately.'" Jiwon felt her cheeks burning. She quickly gathered her music book, mumbled an apology, and hurried off the stage. As she passed Mrs. Han, she couldn't help but notice the disapproving look on the director's face. It made her feel small and ashamed, even though she didn't think she had done anything truly wrong. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Her lesson with Miss Yoon was good, but Jiwon couldn't shake off the embarrassed feeling from her encounter with Mrs. Han. That evening, she went home, had dinner with her family, did her homework, and went to bed. She had no idea that her life was about to change completely. The next morning, Jiwon's mother received a phone call while making breakfast. Her father had already left for his job at the construction site, and her brother was still getting ready for school. Jiwon was eating rice and eggs when she noticed her mother's face turn pale as she listened to whoever was on the other end of the line. Yes, I understand. We'll come right away." Her mother hung up and stood there for a moment staring at the phone. "Jiwon," she said slowly, "that was Mrs. Han from the music academy. We need to go there before school. Right now. Why? What happened?" Jiwon felt a knot forming in her stomach. She didn't explain everything. She just said it was urgent and about the piano. The drive to the academy felt longer than usual. Her mother kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, and Jiwon could tell she was worried. When they arrived, they were immediately shown to Mrs. Han's office. The room was cold and formal, with certificates on the walls and a large desk that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. Mrs. Han didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mrs. Park, thank you for coming so quickly. We have a very serious situation." She turned to look at Ji-won with hard eyes. "Yesterday evening, our piano technician was preparing the recital hall for this weekend's performance. He discovered significant damage to the grand piano. The soundboard is cracked and several strings are broken. The repair cost is estimated at $15,000. Ji-won's mother gasped. That's impossible." "How did this happen?" "According to our security footage, your daughter was the last person to use the piano yesterday afternoon. She was playing unsupervised, which is against our rules. But I didn't do anything." Ji-won burst out. Tears were already forming in her eyes. "I just played it like I always do. I was careful. I promise." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Mrs. Han said coldly. "This is very serious. We'll need to discuss how your family plans to cover the repair costs. We may need to involve our insurance company and possibly legal counsel." Ji-won's mother looked like she might faint. $15,000. Her father worked long hours in construction, and her mother cleaned offices in the evenings. They had been saving for years just to afford Ji-won's music lessons. $15,000 might as well have been $1 million. "There must be some mistake," her mother said, her voice shaking. "Ji-won is a good girl. She would never damage anything intentionally." "Intention doesn't matter when the damage is done," Mrs. Han replied. "I'll give you a few days to consult with your family, but this matter must be resolved. Until then, Ji-won is suspended from all academy activities and banned from using any instruments on the premises." The ride home was silent except for Ji-won's quiet crying in the back seat. When her father came home that evening and heard the news, his face fell. They couldn't afford this. They all knew it. That night, lying in her bed, Ji-won stared at the ceiling. Her keyboard, the small electric one she practiced on at home, sat in the corner of her room. She couldn't even bring herself to look at it. Everything she loved, everything she had worked for, felt like it was slipping away. And worst of all, nobody believed her. The next few days felt like a nightmare that Ji-won couldn't wake up from. Word spread quickly through the music academy. Other students whispered when she walked by. Some pointed. A few kids who used to be friendly suddenly found excuses to avoid her. It hurt more than she could put into words. At her regular school, things weren't much better. Her best friend Soo-min stood by her, but even Soo-min seemed confused. "Did you really break it?" she asked one day at lunch, trying to sound casual but clearly wanting to know the truth. "I didn't," Ji-won said quietly, pushing her food around her plate. "I swear I didn't, but doubt had a way of spreading like smoke. You couldn't see it clearly, but you could feel it everywhere. Even some of her teachers at regular school had heard about the incident. They looked at her differently now, like she was careless or destructive. It made her want to disappear. At home, things were tense. Her parents tried to hide their stress, but Ji-won could hear them talking late at night after they thought she was asleep. Her father's voice, tired and worried, discussing payment plans they couldn't afford. Her mother crying quietly. Ji-won would pull her blanket over her head and wish she could make it all go away. On the 4th day after the incident, something changed. The piano technician who had discovered the damage requested a meeting with Mrs. Han. His name was Mr. Kobayashi, and he had been working with pianos for over 30 years. He was a short man with kind eyes and permanently stained fingers from years of working with wood and strings. He arrived at the academy early in the morning, carrying his toolbox and a folder full of papers. Mrs. Han wasn't happy about being called in for another meeting, but Mr. Kobayashi had been insistent. "I need to discuss my findings," he had said on the phone. "It's important." Miss Yoon, Ji-won's piano teacher, heard about the meeting and asked if she could attend. She had been feeling guilty ever since the incident. After all, she was the one who had encouraged Ji-won to practice on the grand piano. She felt responsible, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about the whole situation. The three of them met in the recital hall, standing on the stage around the damaged piano. Mr. Kobayashi opened his folder and pulled out several photographs he had taken of the piano's interior. "Mrs. Han," he began, adjusting his glasses, "I need to revise my initial assessment. After a thorough examination, I don't believe this damage was caused by someone playing the piano, even roughly." Mrs. Han frowned. "What are you saying? The child was the last one to use it." "Yes, but look here." Mr. Kobayashi pointed to one of the photographs. This crack in the soundboard is old, very old. See how the wood has darkened around the edges? That takes years to develop. And these string breaks, they show signs of metal fatigue and corrosion. This isn't sudden trauma. This is cumulative damage from poor maintenance and environmental factors. Miss Yoon leaned in to look at the photos. Are you saying the piano was already damaged? I'm saying this piano has been neglected for a long time. The humidity levels in this hall aren't regulated properly. Look at the wood warping here and here. The tuning pegs are loose. The felt on the hammers is worn unevenly. When was the last time this instrument had a professional maintenance check? Mrs. Han's face had gone stiff. We have it tuned twice a year. Tuning isn't maintenance, Mr. Kobayashi said gently but firmly. This piano needed internal work years ago. I can show you maintenance recommendations in your files going back 5 years. They were never addressed. The room fell silent. Miss Yoon felt a surge of hope mixed with anger. So Ji-won didn't break the piano? A child playing normally, even enthusiastically, couldn't cause this kind of damage. The piano was already failing. It just finally gave out. Mr. Kobayashi closed his folder. In my professional opinion, blaming that little girl is not just wrong, it's impossible. Mrs. Han's expression was hard to read. I'll need to review this information, she said stiffly. Of course, Mr. Kobayashi replied. I've prepared a full written report for you and for the family you're accusing. Miss Yoon couldn't wait for the meeting to officially end. As soon as it was appropriate, she excused herself and practically ran to her car. She had Ji-won's home address in her records. The family needed to know about this immediately. When she arrived at the small apartment building where Ji-won lived, she climbed 3 flights of stairs and knocked on the door. Ji-won's mother answered, looking tired and worried. Her eyes widened when she saw Miss Yoon. Is everything okay? Is there more trouble? No, Miss Yoon said quickly. May I come in? I have important news. Inside the modest apartment, Miss Yoon explained everything Mr. Kobayashi had discovered. Ji-won, who had been hiding in her room, heard her teacher's voice and came out. When she heard that the piano had been poorly maintained and that she couldn't have caused the damage, tears streamed down her face. But this time they were tears of relief. I knew it, she whispered. I knew I didn't break it. Her mother wrapped her arms around her. Of course you didn't, sweetheart. I should have believed you more strongly from the start. But Miss Yoon's expression was still serious. There's something else. I looked at the security footage again last night. I couldn't sleep and I kept thinking about this whole situation. I noticed something odd. She pulled out her phone and showed them a video clip she had recorded of the security monitor. Look at the piano bench here. See how far it is from the piano? Ji-won is small. When she plays, she pushes the bench close. But in this clip, before she enters the room, the bench is already pulled far back, like someone taller had been sitting there. Ji-won's mother leaned in to look. So someone else was in there before her? That's what I think. I started asking around very quietly. Yesterday I talked to Mr. Choi, the evening janitor. At first he didn't want to say anything. He was afraid of losing his job. But I convinced him it was important. What did he say? Ji-won asked, her heart beating faster. He saw someone in the recital hall that evening before Ji-won arrived. A man. Mr. Choi said the man was well dressed, looked like he might be a parent or visitor. He was sitting at the piano playing something. Mr. Choi didn't think much of it at the time. People often wander into the hall, but he never told anyone because he figured it wasn't important, and he didn't want to get involved in any trouble. Did he see what the man looked like? Ji-won's mother asked, only from a distance. Tall, wearing a dark coat. But here's the thing. The security cameras in the hallway might have caught him entering or leaving the building. If we can get Mrs. Han to check all the footage from that day, not just the recital hall camera, we might be able to identify who it was. Ji-won felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Real hope for the first time in days. Do you think Mrs. Han will check? Miss Yoon's expression hardened. She has to. Now that we know the piano was already damaged and that someone else was in that room, she has no choice. This isn't just about the piano anymore. It's about what's right. That evening, Miss Yoon sent a formal email to Mrs. Han copying the Academy board members. She outlined Mr. Kobayashi's findings, mentioned the janitor's testimony, and requested a full review of all security footage from that day. She also suggested that perhaps the Academy should take responsibility for the years of neglected maintenance instead of blaming a 10-year-old child. The email created quite a stir. Board members started asking questions. Other teachers began speaking up about maintenance issues they had noticed but were afraid to mention. The academy's insurance company got involved and wanted their own investigation. Ji-won didn't know about all of this yet. She just knew that finally, after days of feeling helpless and alone, someone believed her. Someone was fighting for her. She sat at her small keyboard that night and played for the first time since the incident. Her fingers moved across the keys, and even though it was just an electric keyboard and not a grand piano, the music felt like freedom. Her mother listened from the kitchen and smiled through her tears. Her daughter's innocence wasn't proven yet, not completely, but the truth was starting to come out piece by piece, and sometimes that's all you could ask for. A chance for the truth to be heard. 2 weeks had passed since Mr. Kobayashi revealed his findings about the piano. The academy was buzzing with tension. Board meetings were being held behind closed doors. Mrs. Han looked stressed every time anyone saw her. But for Ji-won, nothing had really changed. She was still suspended. Her family still faced the possibility of that terrifying bill. And worst of all, many people still thought she had broken the piano. "It's not fair," Ji-won said to her mother one evening. They were sitting at the kitchen table, and Ji-won was supposed to be doing homework, but she couldn't concentrate. "Mr. Kobayashi said I didn't do it. Why hasn't Mrs. Han apologized? Why am I still banned from the academy?" Her mother sighed. She looked tired. She had been working extra shifts at her cleaning job, just in case they still had to pay something. "Sometimes grown-ups take time to admit when they're wrong, sweetie. It's not right, but that's how it is. I just want to play piano again," Ji-won said softly. "I miss it so much." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know, baby. I know." The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Miss Yoon had a friend who worked at the community center across town. They had been talking over coffee, and Miss Yoon had told her the whole story about Ji-won. Her friend Mrs. Lee had an idea. "Why don't you bring her to play at our community center?" Mrs. Lee suggested. "We have a piano. It's not fancy like the academies, but it's well maintained. Let her perform for people. Let them see what she can really do." Miss Yoon thought about this. "You know, that might actually help. If people see her play properly with care and skill, maybe they'll understand that she could never have damaged an instrument. Plus," Mrs. Lee added, "she needs this. That poor child has been through so much. She needs to remember why she loves music." That evening, Miss Yoon called Ji-won's mother. "I have an idea," she said. "It might sound a little crazy, but hear me out." When she explained the plan, Ji-won's mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Let me talk to Ji-won. If she wants to do it, then yes. But I won't push her. She's been hurt enough." Ji-won was scared when her mother told her about the performance idea. "What if people come just to laugh at me? What if they think I'm showing off? Then let them think what they want," her mother said gently. "But you've done nothing wrong. You have a gift and you shouldn't have to hide it because of lies." After a long pause, Ji-won nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. But I want to play something really hard, something that shows I know what I'm doing." Miss Yoon helped her choose the piece. They decided on Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was incredibly difficult for someone her age. The piece had deep, dramatic chords and required both technical skill and emotional maturity. Many adult pianists found it challenging. "Are you sure?" Miss Yoon asked. "This is very ambitious." "I'm sure," Ji-won said with determination in her eyes. "I want everyone to know that I respect the piano, that I would never hurt it." They had 1 week to prepare. Since Ji-won was still banned from the academy, Miss Yoon offered to let her practice at her apartment. Every day after school, Ji-won would go to Miss Yoon's small home and practice on her upright piano. It wasn't a grand piano, but it was enough. The practice sessions were intense. Ji-won's fingers ached. There were moments when she wanted to give up, when the notes seemed impossible and the piece too hard. But every time she felt like quitting, she remembered Mrs. Han's cold voice saying, "The evidence suggests otherwise." She remembered the whispers at school, the looks of doubt, and she played harder. Miss Yoon watched her student with growing amazement. She had always known Ji-won was talented, but this was something else. The girl wasn't just playing notes. She was pouring everything she felt into the music. All her anger, her sadness, her hope. It was powerful. Mrs. Lee made flyers and posted them around the neighborhood. "Piano performance by young talent," they read. "Saturday at 3 p.m. Community Center." She also added a small note at the bottom. Come support a local student. Word began to spread, especially after someone mentioned it was the girl from the piano incident at Riverside Academy. By Friday evening, the day before the performance, Jiwon was as ready as she could be. She knew the piece by heart. Her fingers knew every note, every pause, every emphasis. But she was terrified. What if I mess up? She asked Miss Yoon during their final practice. Then you mess up, Miss Yoon said simply. But you won't be defined by one mistake. You'll be defined by how you pick yourself up and keep going, just like you're doing now. Saturday arrived with clear skies. Jiwon woke up early, too nervous to eat breakfast. Her mother made her eat at least some toast. You need energy, she insisted. Her father, who had taken the afternoon off from work, patted her shoulder. We're proud of you no matter what happens. When they arrived at the community center at 2 o'clock, Jiwon's heart nearly stopped. There were people already gathering outside. Lots of people. Some she recognized from the neighborhood. Others were strangers. She saw some kids from her school. A few teachers from the academy had come too, though Mrs. Han was notably absent. Mrs. Lee greeted them warmly. The piano is ready for you. Do you want to warm up? Jiwon nodded, too nervous to speak. She walked into the hall and her footsteps echoed just like they had at the academy. The piano sat on a small stage. It wasn't as beautiful as the grand piano she remembered, but it was clean and cared for. She sat down and played a few scales. The sound was good, warm and clear. By 3 o'clock, the hall was packed. Every seat was filled and people stood along the walls. Ji-won peeked through the curtain backstage and felt her stomach flip. There had to be at least 200 people out there. She recognized Mr. Choi, the janitor from the academy. Even Mr. Kobayashi had come, sitting in the third row with a gentle smile on his face. That's a lot of people, Ji-won whispered to her mother. They came to see you, her mother said, kneeling down to look her in the eyes. They came because they want to support you, and even if they didn't, even if they came just out of curiosity, you're going to show them something beautiful, okay? Ji-won took a deep breath and nodded. Mrs. Lee walked onto the stage and spoke into the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today we have a very special young musician performing for us. Please welcome Ji-won. The applause was polite but uncertain. Ji-won walked onto the stage, her legs shaking. The stage lights were bright, making it hard to see faces in the audience. Maybe that was better. She sat at the piano and adjusted the bench. She placed her hands on the keys and felt their familiar coolness under her fingers. For a moment, everything was silent. She could hear her own heartbeat. Then she began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's prelude rang out, deep and ominous. It was like a bell tolling. Ji-won's small hand stretched across the keys, creating sounds that seemed too big to come from someone so young. The music was dark and powerful, full of shadows and depth. As she played, something shifted inside her. The nervousness melted away. The audience disappeared. It was just her and the music, the way it had always been. She played the gentle middle section with such tenderness that some people in the audience felt tears in their eyes. Then the dramatic ending came crashing back, building and building until the final powerful chords rang out. When she played the last note, she held it, letting it fade naturally into silence. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the hall erupted. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Some were crying. Her parents were holding each other, both with tears streaming down their faces. Mr. Kobayashi was clapping so hard his hands hurt. Mr. Choi wiped his eyes with his handkerchief. Even the teenagers who had come out of curiosity were on their feet, genuinely impressed. One of them pulled out his phone. I have to record this, he said to his friend. Nobody's going to believe how good she is. Ji-won stood up and bowed, her own eyes wet with tears. She looked out at all those people, all that support, and something inside her that had been broken started to heal. She had proved something important today, not just to them, but to herself. She wasn't careless. She wasn't destructive. She was a musician, and she treated every instrument with the respect and love it deserved. That evening, Ji-won was exhausted, but happy. She had done it. She had played in front of hundreds of people and didn't freeze up. Her family went out for noodles to celebrate, something they rarely did because money was tight. But tonight felt special enough to splurge a little. I'm so proud of you, her father kept saying, his eyes still a bit red from crying earlier. My daughter, the pianist? Ji-won smiled into her bowl of noodles. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again, like the world made sense. She had no idea that while she was eating dinner, something was happening online that would change everything. The teenager who had recorded part of her performance had uploaded the video to social media that evening. He hadn't thought much of it, just shared it with a simple caption. 10-year-old girl accused of breaking piano proves everyone wrong. This is insane. He had about 300 followers, mostly friends from school and some cousins. By the time Jiwon went to bed that night, the video had been viewed 2,000 times and shared by 50 people. By morning, those numbers had exploded. 20,000 views, 500 shares. People were commenting from all over the country. This child is incredible. I've been playing piano for 15 years and can't play Rachmaninoff like that. Why would anyone accuse her of damaging an instrument? She clearly loves music. This made me cry. Such emotion from someone so young. Jiwon's mother was the first to notice. She had been checking social media during her break at work when she saw the video pop up on her feed. Someone from her church had shared it. Then she saw it again, shared by a former coworker. Then again from someone she barely knew. Her hands started shaking as she watched the view count climb while she stared at the screen. She called her husband immediately. Something's happening. The video of Jiwon is everywhere. By lunchtime, the video had reached 100,000 views. Local news outlets started picking it up. A reporter from the city's biggest newspaper called the community center, asking for information about the young pianist. Mrs. Lee gave them Jiwon's mother's phone number, and soon the family's phone wouldn't stop ringing. When Jiwon came home from school that day, her mother sat her down at the kitchen table with a serious expression. Something big is happening, sweetie. The video of you playing yesterday is being watched by many, many people. There are news reporters who want to talk to you. Jiwon's eyes went wide. Really? How many people? Her mother checked her phone. Right now, over 300,000 people have watched it. Jiwon couldn't even imagine that many people. Her whole school only had about 400 students. 300,000 felt like a number from a dream. The story spread beyond just the video. Journalists did their research and found out about the accusation, the damaged piano, and how Jiwon had been treated. The narrative was irresistible. A talented child wrongly accused, proving her innocence through her gift. By Tuesday, major news websites were running stories with headlines like 10-year-old piano prodigy vindicates herself after false accusation, and young musician's stunning performance goes viral. The video reached 1 million views by Wednesday, then 3 million, then 5. It jumped from their country to others. People in Japan were sharing it, then in Europe, then in America. The comment section became a mix of languages, but the sentiment was universal. People were amazed by Jiwon's talent and outraged by how she had been treated. A famous classical pianist from Austria, a man named Maestro Klaus Hoffmann, came across the video while scrolling through his feed late one night. He was 72 years old and had performed in the greatest concert halls around the world. He had heard thousands of young pianists in his lifetime, but something about Jiwon's performance made him stop and watch the entire thing without interruption. He watched it again. Then a third time. The technical skill was impressive for her age, certainly. But what struck him was the emotion, the maturity in her interpretation, the way she understood the melancholy and power of Rachmaninoff. This wasn't just a talented child playing notes. This was an artist expressing something real. He shared the video on his own social media account, which had over 2 million followers. He wrote, "In my 50 years of performing, I have rarely seen such natural musicality. This young artist doesn't just play the piano. She speaks through it. The accusation against her is absurd. Such talent could never harm an instrument. It can only bring it to life." When Maestro Hoffmann shared the video, it exploded even further. Classical music websites picked up his endorsement. Major international news outlets ran the story. By Friday, exactly 1 week after her performance, Jiwon's video had been viewed over 20 million times worldwide. Jiwon's life became completely surreal. Her school had to ask reporters to stop coming to the campus. Her parents had to change their phone numbers because they couldn't handle all the calls. Miss Yoon became her spokesperson, carefully managing interview requests and trying to protect Jiwon from being overwhelmed. But the attention also brought pressure. The Riverside Music Academy was facing serious backlash. Parents were pulling their children out of the school. The board was receiving angry letters. Someone had left a 1-star review online that went viral. They accused a 10-year-old genius of breaking their poorly maintained piano and tried to charge her family $15,000. Shameful. Mrs. Han tried to ignore it at first. She released a brief statement saying the matter was under review, but the pressure kept building. The Academy's insurance company demanded answers. Board members were calling emergency meetings. Some were talking about removing Mrs. Han from her position. On Friday afternoon, a week after the performance, Mrs. Han finally called Jiwon's family. Her voice was stiff but controlled. "I would like to request a meeting with you and your daughter. Tomorrow, if possible. At the Academy." Jiwon's mother was suspicious. "Why?" "I believe it's time we addressed this situation properly," Mrs. Han said. "I'd like to do so in person." The next morning, Jiwon and her parents walked into the Riverside Music Academy. It felt strange being back after all these weeks. The receptionist greeted Jiwon warmly this time, a guilty smile on her face. They were led not to Mrs. Han's office, but to the recital hall. When they entered, Jiwon was surprised to see not just Mrs. Han, but the entire Academy board, several teachers including Miss Yoon, Mr. Kobayashi the piano technician, and about a dozen reporters with cameras. The damaged grand piano had been removed, and a beautiful new one sat in its place on the stage. Mrs. Han stood at a podium that had been set up. She looked uncomfortable, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She cleared her throat and began to speak. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this gathering to address the situation involving one of our students, Jiwon Park." She paused, seeming to struggle with her next words. "After a thorough investigation, including examination by our piano technician, Mr. Kobayashi, and review of additional security footage, it has been determined that the damage to our piano was not caused by Jiwon's playing. The damage was the result of years of deferred maintenance, which was the responsibility of this institution, not any student." The reporters were scribbling notes frantically. Cameras were flashing. Mrs. Han continued, her voice tight. "Jiwon was wrongly accused, and for that, the Riverside Music Academy offers its sincere apology. We should have investigated thoroughly before making any accusations. We caused significant distress to a young student and her family, and that is inexcusable." She looked directly at Jiwon for the first time. "Jiwon, I am sorry. You deserved better from us." Jiwon felt her mother's hand squeeze hers. Her father stood a little straighter. Miss Yoon was wiping her eyes, but Mrs. Han wasn't finished. "Additionally, the Academy Board has decided that Mrs. Han, myself, will be stepping down as director, effective immediately. The Academy needs leadership that prioritizes our students' well-being above all else. Furthermore, we would like to offer Jiwon a full scholarship to continue her studies here, if she chooses to return." One of the board members stepped forward. He was an older man with kind eyes. "We've also established a maintenance fund to ensure our instruments receive proper care, and we're implementing new policies to protect students from false accusations. What happened to Jiwon should never happen to any child." The reporters erupted with questions. Jiwon's parents looked at each other, then at their daughter. "What do you think?" her mother whispered. "Do you want to come back here?" Jiwon looked around the hall. This place had caused her so much pain, but it had also been where she fell in love with music. She thought about Miss Yoon, who had fought for her, about the other students who had supported her. "About the beautiful new piano on the stage, I think," she said slowly. "I want to keep playing and learning, but things have to be different." "They will be," the board member promised. "We're committed to that." As the press conference ended and people began to leave, Jiwon walked up to the stage. She looked at the new grand piano, shiny and perfect. She reached out and gently touched the keys. They were cool and smooth under her fingers. She pressed one key softly, and the note rang out clear and true. It sounded like a new beginning. The weeks following the press conference felt like living in a dream. Jiwon's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The apology from the Academy had been shared millions of times online. People called her brave. They called her talented. They called her inspiring. It was overwhelming and wonderful and scary all at the same time. But the biggest surprise came 2 weeks after the press conference. Jiwon was practicing at home on her small keyboard when her mother called her to the living room. "Sweetie, you need to see this." Her mother's laptop was open to a video call. On the screen was an elderly man with white hair and the kindest eyes Jiwon had ever seen. He was sitting in what looked like a beautiful study, with bookshelves and framed photographs behind him. "Hello, Jiwon," the man said in accented English. "My name is Klaus Hoffmann. I've been hoping to speak with you." Jiwon's jaw dropped. She knew exactly who he was. Maestro Hoffmann, one of the greatest pianists in the world. She had listened to his recordings dozens of times, and now he was on her laptop screen smiling at her. Hello, she managed to say, suddenly feeling very shy. Maestro Hoffmann chuckled. "I know this must be strange for you, but I wanted to tell you personally how moved I was by your performance. You have something very special, young lady, a gift that should be nurtured and developed." They talked for nearly an hour. Maestro Hoffmann asked her about her practice routines, her favorite composers, what made her love music. He told her stories about his own childhood learning piano in Vienna. He made her laugh and put her at ease. By the end of the conversation, Jiwon felt like she was talking to a kind grandfather. "I would like to offer you something," Maestro Hoffmann said as their conversation was winding down. "There is a music academy in Vienna, one of the finest in Europe. They offer a summer program for exceptional young musicians from around the world. I have some influence there, and I would like to sponsor your attendance. All expenses paid. Your family wouldn't have to worry about the cost." Jiwon looked at her mother, who had tears in her eyes. That's incredibly generous," her mother said. "But Vienna is so far away." "It is," Maestro Hoffmann agreed. "And I understand if it's too much. But I believe Jiwon has the potential to be truly great. Not just good, but great, and she deserves every opportunity to develop her talent. Think about it, discuss it as a family, and let me know. There's no pressure." After the call ended, Jiwon sat quietly for a moment. Vienna. The summer program would be 6 weeks. 6 weeks in a foreign country away from her family, learning from the best teachers in the world. It was terrifying, but it was also the most exciting thing she could imagine. That night, her family had a long discussion. Her brother, who usually teased her, was actually supportive. "You should go," he said. "This is a huge opportunity. Don't be scared." Her father worried about her being so far away. "You're only 10 years old. What if something happens?" "I'll be supervised the whole time," Jiwon said, having already researched the program online. "And Maestro Hoffmann will be there. He's teaching some of the classes." Her mother was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "A month ago, we thought our daughter's musical dreams were over. We thought we'd lose our home trying to pay for a piano she didn't break. Now she's being invited to study in Vienna with one of the world's greatest pianists. How can we say no to that?" Jiwon went to Vienna that summer. The program was harder than anything she had ever done. She practiced for hours every day. Her fingers hurt. She cried from frustration more than once. But she also learned more in those 6 weeks than she had in years of lessons at home. Maestro Hoffmann was a patient but demanding teacher. He pushed her to be better, to dig deeper into the music, to find the story in every piece she played. She made friends from all over the world. There was Chen from China, who played the cello and made everyone laugh. Aisha from Egypt, who sang opera and had the most beautiful voice. Marco from Italy, who played violin and always had a smile on his face. They were all incredibly talented, and Jiwon learned something from each of them. The program ended with a final performance. Each student would play one piece in front of an audience that included teachers, parents, and music critics. Jiwon chose a Chopin nocturne, one she had been working on with Maestro Hoffmann. It was beautiful and delicate, very different from the powerful Rachmaninoff piece that had made her famous. The night of the performance, Jiwon was nervous, but ready. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage of the historic concert hall. I would be honored to work with her. The piano was magnificent, a concert grand that had been played by famous musicians for over 100 years. She sat down, took a breath, and began to play. The Chopin flowed from her fingers like water. Gentle, graceful, full of subtle emotion. When she finished, the applause was warm and appreciative. But what mattered most to her was the look on Maestro Hoffmann's face. He was smiling, and when their eyes met, he nodded. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to her. It meant she had done well. It meant she was on the right path. When she returned home at the end of summer, everything felt different, not just because of what she had learned in Vienna, but because of how she saw herself. She wasn't the scared little girl who had been accused of breaking a piano anymore. She was a musician with a future. The Riverside Music Academy had transformed in her absence. The new director, Mr. Park, no relation to her family despite the same last name, was young and energetic. He had implemented all the changes the board had promised. The instruments were properly maintained now. There was a suggestion box where students could voice concerns anonymously. And most importantly, there was a new policy. No student would ever be accused of anything without a full investigation first. Miss Yoon was still teaching there, and she welcomed Ji-won back with a huge hug. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You've grown so much." But the biggest change was visible the moment Ji-won walked into the recital hall. There, hanging on the wall near the stage, was a large framed photograph. It showed Ji-won sitting at the piano during her community center performance, her face intense with concentration, her small hands stretched across the keys. Below the photo was a plaque that read, Ji-won Park, a reminder to always seek the truth, nurture talent, and believe in our students. Ji-won stared at it, feeling a mix of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also a sense of responsibility. She was an example now. Other kids would look at her story and feel hope when things seemed unfair. That was both wonderful and a little scary. 6 months after the incident, the community center where Ji-won had given her breakthrough performance approached her with an idea. They wanted to start a program providing free music lessons to children from families who couldn't afford them. They asked if Ji-won would be willing to help. Not to teach, since she was still learning herself, but to perform at fundraising events and to be a voice for the program. "Music changed my life," Ji-won said at the program's launch event. She was standing at a microphone in front of a crowd of potential donors and supporters. "When I was accused of breaking that piano, I thought I'd never get to play again. I thought my dream was over. But people believed in me. They fought for me. Miss Yoon, Mr. Kobayashi, Mrs. Lee, Maestro Hoffman. They gave me a chance. Now I want to help give other kids that same chance." The program raised enough money in that first event to provide lessons for 50 children. By the end of the year, they had instruments donated and teachers volunteering. Ji-won performed at every fundraiser, always playing with the same passion and dedication that had made her famous. 2 years later, Ji-won was 12 years old and had performed in several cities around her country. She still studied with Miss Yoon, though now she also had video lessons with Maestro Hoffman once a month. She was preparing to audition for a prestigious music conservatory for high school. Her technique had improved remarkably, but more than that, she had matured as an artist. One evening, she was practicing in the recital hall at Riverside Academy. It was late, and the building was mostly empty. She was working on a difficult Beethoven sonata, getting frustrated with a particular passage. She stopped and rested her hands on the keys, looking at the piano. She thought about everything that had happened. The accusation, the fear, the tears, the breakthrough performance, the viral video, the apology, Vienna. All of it had led to this moment sitting at a beautiful piano in a quiet hall, doing what she loved most in the world. She realized something important. The piano that had been broken wasn't the one in this hall. It was never about that instrument. The thing that had been broken was trust and fairness. And through music, through truth, through people who cared, that had been repaired, made even stronger than before. Ji-won smiled and placed her fingers back on the keys. The difficult passage still needed work, and she wasn't going to let it defeat her. She played it again, slower this time, focusing on each note. Then again a little faster, then again until it started to sound right. Until it started to sound like music. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The light streamed through the tall windows of the recital hall, illuminating the piano and the young girl playing it. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a scene from a movie. But it was real. It was her life. And she was grateful for every note of it.